Well, let's look at that and other macroeconomic issues with Olajide Oyadeyi. He's a macroeconomist and joins us virtually from Lagos. Mr. Oyadeyi, good afternoon and thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Ini.
Good to have you. So I wonder what your thoughts are on this rebasing of the GDP and the CPI, especially around the issues of a fear of political interference in the accumulation of this data.
Thank you very much, Ini. In terms of the GDP rebasing and CPI, I think from time to time, it is very important that every economy review its GDP numbers as well as the weight of items that are inputted inside the consumption basket for the value of the goods and services that are being produced in the economy. Also, for the CPI as well, it's also important that the weight of the consumption basket is being reviewed from time to time, usually around 5 years. So I think the conversation around this today is quite important because if you look at the last time that this was done, I think that was in 2014, which is roughly 10 years. So I would say we are about 5 years back in terms of checking what we have for our, the consumption basket for our inflation numbers, as well as the GDP numbers as well.
All right. While we look forward to that, another thing that I guess we would like to correct in the year 2025 is the exit of companies and shutdown of others in the country. So in 2011, Nigeria had its best days where foreign direct investment hit 8.4 billion. That's as even up till now been termed the best, be an all-time high. In the same year, we had 2.9% drop in inflation, 414.5 billion GDP, and 13% increase from 360. So they're talking about the GDP. So I know that a major concern for a lot of companies that changed their mode of operation, left the country, or got shut down, had to do with the FX. We've seen a bit of stability, a relative stability in the value of the naira in the last 1 month, past 1 month. Would you say that we can escape this wave of exits in 2025?
Yes, technically, definitely. I would say that some of the reforms that the government has been putting forward in the last 1 year, a year plus, we're beginning to see some of the effects of some of these reforms. So technically, I expect that not just in 2025, but even in 2024, the last quarter of 2024, I also expect that capital importation, particularly foreign direct investment, is going to increase. If you look at what we have on capital importation, you will see that it's a bit over the last 10, 15 years, like you mentioned, particularly between 2011 and 2015, 2013 and 2014, particularly being the sweet spots because of that was the period where Nigeria was able to achieve macro stability, where inflation was very low, GDP growth was very sustainable, the current account balance were in its positive territory, and you could see that the macro stability index for the Nigerian economy was quite stable during the period. However, now, particularly since after the COVID-19 pandemic happened, you would see that capital importation in Nigeria has been particularly very low. And this changed quite a bit recently in 2024 because, again, the federal government has been able to put down some of the reforms that they wanted to achieve in 2024, while the central bank has also ensured that some of its policies are also in sync with what the federal government is trying to do. So what you could see there was that a bit of stability in Q1 2020, a bit of increase in terms of capital importation numbers, particularly in Q1 and Q2 2024. But something we're beginning to see in Q3 is a shift from capital importation. Before now, you realize that FPIs and other investments have been typically the biggest of investments in Nigeria up until Q2 2024. But what we had, there was a bit of shift in the third quarter of 2024, where you could realize that where we've seen that FDI has begun to increase, even though it's very small. But when something increases from about roughly 1.15%, as a percentage of total capital importation to about 8.72% in Q4. And also bearing the fact that none of these foreign direct investments were done in the oil and gas sector, which is one of the 6 biggest sectors in the Nigerian economy. And as well, none of this was also done in the telecom sector, which has a lot of potential for growth due to a lot of developments and innovations coming in through AI and the likes. You then get to see that in Q4 2024, FDI is going to increase drastically beyond what it is. Then also feeding into 2025, I also have that strong positive outlook for foreign direct investment in Nigeria due to some of these policy reforms that we've seen so far.
Interesting. I mean, when you say a drastic positive outlook, I wonder what that means. Does it look up to 100%? Is it a 50%? Or where do you place it when you say it's drastic?
Okay, not necessarily 100%, but again, when we look at what we are doing, let me take it a bit further. In Q2 of 2024, FDI investment was roughly about $29.83 million in Nigeria, but this improved drastically to about $183 million. So if you look at that, that is already above 100%. And again, there are several other potentials as well, because if you look at the banking industry, there's a lot of conversation as regards recapitalization. If you look at the telecoms industry, you could see what is going on in terms of advanced development in the industry, particularly ICT, fintech, and the rest of them. So you could see that there are a lot of potentials for foreign investors to come into the economy. But again, there are several risks which I know I haven't mentioned earlier. So if the economy can guide against some of these risks, then it's possible for us to see a much more increase in foreign direct investments. But again, in terms
of... Perhaps you could tell us the sectors of interest, and then you can also mention those risks.
Okay, from the top of my head, I would like to say that Nigeria has about 46 sectors. Sometimes when you trickle them down, you talk about 19 sectors. But from these 46, 10 of them are the biggest sectors, one of which includes agriculture, real estate, finance and insurance, telecoms, and manufacturing sector, oil and gas, and the rest of them. So if I am to think about FDI that can actually drive Nigerian growth sustainably, I would want to focus on the 10 biggest sectors of the Nigerian economy. The reason being that these sectors contribute roughly 90% to economic activities in Nigeria. And again, what I'll be targeting from the policy side or from the government side is, it's not about just having that growth. It's about having, making sure that some of these sectors are fast growing. And what do I mean by fast growing? They grow above 3% each on the quarter-on-quarter basis. Now, if this happens, this has a reason to feed into sustainable development of these sectors, because we definitely know if the capital comes into Nigeria, some of the unemployment rates we are seeing will definitely reduce. Then it also has the potential to increase the demand of goods and services from households and consumers. Then as well, if that happens, then you will expect that GDP per capita and some of the other macro metrics that we use to measure like final household consumption expenditure and the likes is going to increase. That's on one side of it. Then the other side of it, which I strongly believe, is the aspect of household, the aspect of competition again. So when FDI comes in, it makes existing firms become more competitive in the economy, and competition breeds innovation, and innovation breeds efficiency. And what we eventually see is an increase in productivity as well as economic activities at large.
So what are those possible risks to this growth?
So there are several of them, one of which includes political instability. So generally, compared to where we were in 2023, you could see that the heightened instability has reduced. But something that is not often really mentioned today is economic policy uncertainty and geopolitical risk. This has a way of dampening some of the outlooks to capital importation in Nigeria. Also, I'd also like to mention the weak security issues that Nigeria is currently facing, particularly in the northern part of the country and some aspects in the southern part of the country. So, security, if insecurity heightens, then you are telling your potential investors that you cannot guide against, like you cannot they are not sure of having their investment secured in the country. So one of the things we need to look at as an economy is to increase the security apparatus to ensure that to guide against some of these risks. Finally, something I'd like to mention here again is as regards the inflation numbers of the country. Again, because inflation numbers is quite high, so what that means is that for foreign investors coming in, they may have to think that at 34.6, this means that household consumption would reduce because, again, most Nigerians are poor. And at a GDP per capita of about 2,460 in 2023, you are compared to before pandemic where we had over 2,500. You know that poor households are like income in these households are reducing. So if income is reducing, again, what that means is that they might not have the demand to, they might not have the purchasing power to buy some of these items. So those are some of the risks and many others. But I would like to stop here.
All right, but Olajide, you know that kind of counters your opening optimism when you said that at least we've seen improvement in our FDIs and you do see that the benefits of the reforms, the economic reforms, we'll see more of it in this year. But with all of these risks, how do we place that expectation of the benefits of the reforms?
Let me also mention that for every opportunity that we see in an economy, there are always the downside risks to it. So, so out of every policy that we've seen or every reform that we've seen in the Nigerian economy, we should expect that there are always some downside risk. So the risk affecting Nigerian economy is nothing new. It's something that has been ongoing for a while now. And so the security situation, the economic policy uncertainty, which sometimes I would say it's not just limited to Nigeria. It's something that you can call, like even some parts of Eastern Europe, parts of the world, Latin America, are also witnessing some of these issues. So again, I wouldn't want to be to gracefully say that some of these policies are automatically going to feed into FDI and increase FDI to new heights or to new levels. But again, if the government can guide against some of these risk and provide the enabling environment for private sector to thrive, then you expect that FDI should come in. For instance, something that has not often been mentioned when it comes to the Nigerian economy is the weak links in the transportation sector, logistics, as well as the transportation sector and logistics and the supply chain. So, I mean, but again, we can see that there are ongoing reforms on the railway systems and on the roads. And this can also, when foreign investors see some of these kind of developments going in, they could as well think about, okay, so why don't we come in and look at how to set up our investments in the country to potentially get more benefits from some of the investments going on. Again, something else that I know it will take a while before the country is able to get out of that is the energy supply, or let's say the power and electricity system. But again, what we currently have is most foreign investors in the Nigerian economy, even domestic investors, don't rely so much on the government electricity. They also source for alternative sources of electricity. So again, while some of these are issues in the current economy, you could still somehow say that, yes, they may want to discourage investment, but again, investors have to think about it critically and check, it's about what is the opportunity cost for them coming into the Nigerian economy, or maybe taking their investments elsewhere. If the opportunity cost for them shows that staying in coming into the Nigerian economy is their best bet, despite all of this, we said they are going to take that bet and they are going to come into the Nigerian economy. So something we could see from portfolio investment is, despite some of these downside risk, you could see that NB, the parent company of Nigerian Breweries, in Q3 recently increased its share capital by about 342 billion naira in the Nigerian stock exchange. So in the Nigerian Breweries rather. So, and also you could see Tolerant Group trying to take over this Singaporean company, trying to take over Diageo company to acquire Diageo, the shares of Diageo in the Nigerian economy. So you could see that, yes, so there are potential. So when other foreign investors see some of these ongoing information or some of these ongoing happenings, then they could also look at it as a potential limelight for them to also come into the Nigerian economy to boost foreign capital in the Nigerian economy, bearing in mind that most of these issues are not just limited to Nigeria. So if we take a look, sometimes if we take a look at the Nigerian economy and we stay within the economy, we might say, okay, the economy may not be able to attract that much potential. But when you take a comparison of the Nigerian economy to several economies, not just in West Africa, but globally, you would see that Nigeria has a lot of potential, particularly because of the land mass, particularly because of the population, and particularly because of the human capital that we have, which are always available in Nigeria. So those are some of the potentials that foreign investors are looking at to ensure that they bring some of their investments into the country.
Yeah, well, we do hope that even if we can, I mean, not that we shouldn't attract a lot of foreigners, but let's not lose, not as much as we had last year. We lost, you know, I think they said between 2020 and 2024, we lost more than 20 companies exiting the country. I hope we will not have that story. And if we could even have local players, you know, take the spots of those multinationals, I guess we'll be in a good place.
Yes, so something to also mention is that the reason why some of these players left Nigeria was not, the bigger ones, was not particularly because of Nigeria, but because of the global headwinds affecting global economies. COVID-19 struck the world in 2020. And if you look at some of the policies that were used to cushion some of the effects in advanced economies, most of the developing economies and EMDs like Nigeria did not have such buffers as a result. So take, for instance, a typical company in the United Kingdom, which had to shut down because of COVID-19. The government had to pay their salaries for like a year during the period of COVID and the like, but those kind of buffers were not available in Nigeria. And when you don't have the demand for your products, right? So what it means is that you're just producing, you are losing money. So the best thing for some of them, was to leave the Nigerian economy. But while the COVID-19 had a more debilitating effect on advanced economies in terms of health, for Nigeria, it had a more structural effect in terms of economic activities. So because of the lower demand at the time, that led to so many of them leaving out. Again, while we speak about the COVID-19 event, we could also see the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war on the Nigerian economy, where some of the goods that are being imported from some of these destinations were affected. Prices skyrocketed, which was one of the reasons that has led to food inflation heightening in Nigeria before now. So if you look at some of these issues, you realize that they are not just typical to the Nigerian economy. So like I said, most of the issues affecting the Nigerian economy has been around even before COVID-19. Power, transport system, the logistics, electricity, they've all been before the COVID-19 happened. But something that you can speak about more recently is in terms of security and the likes. So you could also say that even with that, so many of these investors decided to stay in the Nigerian economy because they were still making a lot of money from the Nigerian economy and also improving the development of the Nigerian economy. But some of the reasons why they had to leave was the Russian war in Ukraine, which affected the supply of raw materials from some of these destinations. And even from when some of these companies decided to look at alternative places, because of those alternative countries had a higher demand for their product, then inflation would definitely, or prices would definitely rise, particularly for some of these goods. And when they rise, what will eventually happen is inflation is going to increase, which is what we've seen in the persistent increase in importation of some of the cost of raw materials that we use to produce goods in Nigeria as well. You know, Nigerian exchange rate has depreciated drastically in the last 2 years. So as well. So what it automatically means is, as exchange rate keeps depreciating, what you would find is that the cost of importation would also increase. So some of these things are fed into inflation, as we have as of November, which is at about 34.6%. So I would say that yes. So some of the issues that Nigeria has been facing is not just limited to the Nigerian or the domestic economy, as it were, but some of the capital exportation has been due to, you know, their inability to attract some raw materials, the COVID-19 pandemic, and and how this has affected the Nigerian economy at large.
All right, so thank you so much for that. But at least we sense optimism, and we do hope that it stays that way, you know, as we get more into the year 2025. Macroeconomist Olajide Oyadei, thank you for your perspective.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too. Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll head to the markets. Intraday numbers next.